Blonde man?
Blonde man jokes.
Blonde or blind?
Blonde.
Blonde.
We always tell women, blonde women jokes. This is
Okay,
blind
got
man
it, got
jokes.
it.
There's three little short ones, so.
Okay.
A blind man is in the bathroom and his wife shouts out, "Did you find the shampoo?" He answers yes, but I'm not sure what to do. It's for dry hair and I just wet mine. A blind man spots a letter on his doormat and on the envelope it says, "Do not bend." He spends the next 2 hours trying to figure out how to pick it up. And then a blind man shouts frantically into the phone, "My wife is pregnant and her contractions are only 2 minutes apart." And the doctor says, "Is this her first child?" He says, "No," he shouts, "this is her husband." Lunch today's at Torchy's. How many's going to Torchy's?
Yeah.
Torchy's.
Hold on, buddy, she's ready to count. 2,
9?
9, 6, 7,
9?
9.
Good to see Martha Campbell back.
That's right.
Missed you. And Ann. Missed you.
Ann's here.
Too.
It's good to be back.
All you want to do is prayers and praises.
Sure. You didn't say we're glad to see Wallace back.
Glad to see you back. Glad you had a safe trip.
Not sure.
David?
Sandy.
Nan-
What's her
Sandy,
name?
you got-
You know who. You know who right there.
For the donut.
Okay, go ahead.
I just have a question before I pass out the sign-up sheet for the Christmas party. Would anyone be interested in going to a tour of homes in Carroll, Texas? It's going to be December the 3rd, 2 to 7, $25 a person. And I'll get that worked up for us if anyone would be interested in that.
What is it?
A tour of homes, that you go on tour of the homes.
We're going, but we're already going with friends.
Yeah.
Normally I go ahead and do the sign-up sheet, but it's a little pricey, so I thought I'd
Yeah.
go check with y'all.
Only the rich people go.
With some friends.
They didn't say, so I don't know. I don't know how many houses, maybe it's on their website now, but it's. Also, I have the sign-up sheet for, the Christmas party for December the 8th, which is a Thursday, at, 6 o'clock. And if anybody needs a ride, please let me know, because we don't want anyone not coming because they need a ride.
And if there's someone that says, I can carry 2 people, would you also text her and let her know so that somebody says, I can take 2 people if you have 2 people that don't want to
We're
drive?
gonna work it out where everyone gets to come if
Yeah.
they need a ride.
Good deal.
So I made a call on the sign-up sheet for us.
You want me to pick you up?
This is one thing this class can never do right. They pass it and then it goes back and it comes up.
I need to start with you.
Oh, no, could you start back there, Gary?
I don't think we've ever done one right.
We're already on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does anyone need it down
Have y'all seen it, the sign-up
Have
sheet?
y'all signed up?
for the Christmas party?
Oh, I think we signed up, but I'm not sure.
You better sign it. We'll get anything to eat.
I didn't see it, if it was on there, I just looked briefly, so.
While they're passing that around, and Steve Hunter texted me, let me know he's gonna be with family today, and he wouldn't be here. Steve Hunter always texts me anytime he's not gonna be here. Our backups are Doris and Paul, and neither one of them here today, so you get the 4th in the lineup, which is me. Talk about any praises people have. Anything good going on?
Had a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Yeah, good, all right. Everybody's now, they're nodding, yeah, they
Yeah.
did, but, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's great.
Linda didn't have to cook for the first time in a year.
I was
Oh.
way over 30 years. And I tried to make a pie and I messed it up.
Think what if you cooked a whole meal, what a mess you'd have.
She said she didn't think she could do that.
Yeah, well, Glenn and I too got to go up
After the
to
power
Anna.
deal, I decided if I had to cook the whole dinner, I'd just put the
Yeah.
Cracker Barrel.
Yeah, we got to go up there with all the kids and grandkids, big group, and it was wonderful. Yeah, you're right about that. That's good time to be with family. Anybody else? I'm thankful to see Jerry back and
And
Martha
Martha.
Campbell. Huh?
And Martha, I said.
Martha
It's been a
Campbell,
long
yeah.
time.
Yeah, we've been staying in contact a little bit
Yeah,
through
we
text
have.
messages.
And you know what, I've got I'm so thankful. 19 years ago this weekend, it was the day after Thanksgiving, I was rushed to the hospital and told I had 3 months to live.
Oh,
And actually, they told me that was because of cancer. They told me because of kidney failure, I wouldn't see the sun come up in the morning. But that was 19 years ago, the day after Thanksgiving, and I told them, I said, you know what, God has the last word.
that's right. He had a plan for you
Yeah, and I proved them wrong.
19 years ago.
19 years
You hear
ago.
what it said? 3 minutes to live. 19 years ago, and she's still here. That's a good praise, isn't it?
Right.
3 months.
And I
3
had
months.
close
Huh?
calls.
3 months. I thought you meant
I
months, not
probably had
minutes.
some close calls.
That's still a miracle.
It is.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Anybody else?
3 minutes.
Glad to see Jerry and Susan back.
And he's got his brace off.
And no brace on?
Right, got rid of it.
Wow, good for you. We're glad to have that back. Yeah.
No surgery, no brace, no movement of the fracture, all together.
My gosh, yeah. God must like you.
I think he does.
We certainly answered prayer.
Yes, it is. Lots of prayer. Thank all the team leaders for the wonderful job they do, passing prayer requests around. That is just so wonderful.
They do a good job.
Yeah. Okay.
This is a praise on the way from Nashville to Maryland, our granddaughter and family. She's traveling.
Well, I won't
with
be
a
able to come, thank you.
3-month-old and a 3-year-old, and they lost an engine. They got there safely, they got a 300 credit, but while all this was going on, the 3-year-old jumped up and said, "Emergency, emergency, the plane is crashing."
Just what you needed to hear.
They said it was kind of funny, but yet scary, and it was fun to see the people's expressions around it. And he's a very dramatic figure.
That's crazy. Okay, prayer request? Yeah, okay, we'll start.
I talked to Jan yesterday, and she's hobbling along. She said, he is not moving for 2 weeks, so tomorrow is the end of his 2 weeks. So he goes back to the doctor to see what he'll be able to do next, which hopefully will be a little more movement than they've been allowing. So she thinks he can move his head and all more after tomorrow. But she said that RV is getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah, they're living in an RV park temporarily.
Their home won't be ready until after the first of the year.
Wow, okay.
They're looking forward to that. And I said, well, neither one of you can move very much, so you don't need much space.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and during all this time that she's had so many problems and in and out of hospital, emergency rooms, ICU and stuff, she still hangs on to being a team leader in chorus stuff. There's a couple times I did it for her, but she still does that. Even though you don't see her here, she stays with it, and she does a good job. We're proud of her. Anybody else got a prayer request?
Oh.
Okay.
Still pray for my friend John Gregory and his wife. It's gotten bad. He hasn't eaten anything all weekend.
That's scary.
He hasn't drank anything. He usually asks for a cup of coffee, but he's not.
Last 2 days, he didn't drink or eat.
That's good. That's in your neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I remember John and his wife back here. Well,
We still haven't heard anything from Benali,
okay.
our daughter. I'm getting really frustrated.
Yeah.
Maybe,
No.
I bet you if we withheld the money.
You would hear from him? Yeah. You might want to try that.
Last time I heard from her, she was asking for the Christmas money.
Okay, all right. Pray for Denali's health. Yes.
I have a prayer request for our little great niece. She's undergoing some testing and we're just praying for good results.
How old is she?
3.
3 years old. What is her name?
Audrey.
Audrey, 3 years old.
I have one.
Okay.
I have a prayer request for Lloyd's youngest brother, Don. He went to his deer lease and he was climbing up into the thing.
Tree stand, yeah.
And the ladder came apart. It's been there a long, long time. And he went down, ladder came down, and he broke his ankle.
Oh, no.
And so he's on a walker.
Okay, is that one that lives in Plano? Yeah, okay.
And he, he lives alone, and he's on a walker, and he's in a lot of pain.
Okay, what is his first name?
Don.
Don. Remember Don, broken ankle. He's not a young guy either, is he? So that's harder on us.
He's younger than me,
Huh?
but everybody's younger than me.
I was thinking the same thing.
Everybody's younger than you.
Hey, hey,
That's what she said just under her breath.
hey. Don't
JJ?
need that from over
Bud
there.
is better, but he's still pretty sick.
Okay.
Who said, Ginger?
Bud,
Oh,
on his
okay,
son-in-law.
Okay. Have another one over here somewhere. Is there anybody that didn't get the Christmas list when it went around? We got it past everybody. Well, we did it. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting that people gather for a meal once a year, and for some of those that gather, that's the first time they're involved in a prayer. They always ask me to lead the prayer. And, we had 20-something people in the house in there, but afterwards, one of them walked me, and he's a good Christian. He said, "You've done that before, haven't you?" and I told him later, one of them, I said, I was going to take my Brooklyn's 11-year-old, and she's just really sharp, and she goes to church and everything. The next Thanksgiving, I'm going to ask her if she wants to do it, and she said, yeah. And they asked me to pray. I said, okay, we're going to have a little change. Everybody bow your heads first, and then I'm going to have her pray. She's a sweet little girl, and that whole family, that's one of our families that everybody goes to church. The other families, Christians mostly, but they don't go. You would think all my relatives would go. Doesn't happen that way, does it?
No.
Who's the hardest people to witness to?
Your family.
Yeah, they want to hear it. I had a sister-in-law tell me one time, we enjoyed you coming over the house, but next time leave your Bible at home.
Oh, my.
Yeah. Anyway, we have a lot to be grateful for. Remember these in prayer. When you get prayer requests, remember these. And I hear a lot about these people in Ukraine and what they're going through, some of them, if we have time, I got a little 10 or 12 second video of something in Ukraine, but those people are going through a lot. Let's bow and have prayer. Lord Jesus, we thank you for this day. Thank you that we're healthy enough to get up and come in here and enjoy fellowship with one another. I see so many smiling faces, and that's so good for us. We all need this, and we thank you for providing this class and bringing us all together. We pray for these requests that have been made. You heard them, you know who they are. And we pray that you will heal those that can be healed, and others, they just need comforting. And please do that with these people. We ask this in your name. Amen. That's one way to get people quiet, isn't it? Have a prayer. If you talk while I'm praying, then you have to do it next week. Oh, okay. We got 4 blank groups, counting this one before it's Christmas. And we're going to have lessons on what they call the Advent. We'll get into that, so you'll see. I wanted to remind you, we're gonna have a movie day. You'll get the dates later. In December, The Carpenter's Miracle. You'll love it. In January, we're gonna have one called Saved by Grace. And yeah, that's a gun he's got on right there, police officer. You're gonna love this one. And one of my favorites, Gabriel. Wow, in February. So when Sandy sends out information, tells you this is the date, you don't want to miss these. How many have been to at least one of these movies? Quite a few. And those with your hands down, try to make it when you see the actual dates on these. These have been some really good movies, I think. Now then, back to our lesson for today. We're looking at Isaiah chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. That's not a lot for somebody to teach 30, 40-minute lesson on 4 scriptures. But we'll see how it goes. First, you need to know the meaning of Advent. It just means the arrival of a notable person or a thing or an event. It also means the coming or second coming of Christ. They call it the Advent. The Advent. Some people don't know if they're looking at the first one or the second one. Some are still looking for the first coming, while others are waiting for the second coming. But the rapture is not the same thing as the second coming. Jesus came, there's a rapture, and then later he will return. We're going to have 4 lessons on the Advent. The one that brings us, he's the one that brings us hope. He brings us peace. He brings us joy. He brings us love. Those are the next 4 lessons counting today. This is the one we're going to zero today, is hope. Now we need to look at the meaning of hope. We saw the meaning of Advent. It's a feeling of expectation and a desire for a certain thing to happen. Hope. The Hebrew word for hope is tikvah, and I looked it up, and that's exactly the way you pronounce it. Some of these I can't. And the meaning of that is wait for, or wait for with expectation, hoping for this event is going to happen or that's going to happen. The Apostle Paul used the word hope often in his New Testament writings. Sometimes Paul uses the word hope, and he really means, for today, we put the word assurance. So he's using the word hope, but you read his scriptures, and it's really assurance, while other times it means tikvah, or waiting for, on there. Paul's writings were after the Messiah had come. He was not here, he was not. So his writings Jesus had come to earth, ascended back into heaven. So Paul was writing about the hope or assurance that we have in the return of Jesus in the clouds, that we might be raptured, or then we would die and we would go up there anyway. However, the writings by the prophets in the Old Testament, they were written about hope, tikvah, waiting for the first coming of the Messiah. Okay, the prophets were in the Old Testament. Jesus hadn't come yet. So they're writing, and they're going to put down what they think they're looking for. So we're going to look at the writings of Isaiah. And verse 1, he said, "This is what Isaiah, son of Amoz, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem." Now we're going to get into some heavy Bible study. We'll get into some of this. This one word tells us that Isaiah had a vision from God. Sometimes God speaks to him, and you hear the voice. Sometimes he shows you things. You remember John wrote Revelation? He said, man, God told me you're going to see all these things. And he said, I want you to write them all down for the people. So this is one that he actually saw an image, a view. In the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as the highest of the mountains. It will be exalted above the hills, and all nations will stream to it. Isaiah is writing about the coming of the Messiah and the things that will happen when he comes. There's nothing wrong with that. He's still in the Old Testament. Jesus hadn't come yet. He says, many peoples will come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the temple of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways so that we may walk in his paths. The law will go out from Zion and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Now you saw this in a vision. He will judge between the nations and he will settle disputes for many people. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for any war anymore. What is he delivering in this message? First of all, I want to show you because he said in Judah and Jerusalem. Isaiah reigned as a major prophet in the southern kingdom called Judah. The southern kingdom consisted of two tribes, Judah and Benjamin. The northern kingdom consisted of the other 10 tribes, and it is called Israel. Does anybody remember why Israel split into the northern and southern kingdoms? Anybody? Anybody want to guess? You remember Solomon built the temple. God gave him wisdom. He built the temple. Wouldn't let David build it because Solomon's father David, he says, no, you have too much blood on your hands. You can gather materials, but your son Solomon will build the temple. It was called Solomon's temple, and it was big, it was grand, it was wonderful. But the problem was to get that built. Where'd he get his money?
Taxes.
Where'd he get his workers? If somebody said taxes, and that's right. He taxed the people really hard to get money to buy these things. He even sent people to Lebanon, which is north of Israel, to get some of the, they call them the trees of Lebanon, and bring that wood down and use it. So when Solomon died, he had a son named Rehoboam. I can't say it. Rehoboam. And a member from each of the tribe of Israel gathered to question him. Solomon's son, now the king. And they said, your father said he taxed us heavily. Are you going to reduce these? He said, no. In fact, I'm going to increase them even more. So 10 of the tribes says that we don't want nothing to do with you. We'll stay up here in the north and we'll have our own kingdom, and you can stay down there in Jerusalem. Well, only 2 tribes stayed in that area. One was Judah and the other one was Benjamin. So you have 2 in the south, and in the north you have 10. Now what's interesting about those 10 that are in the north up there, because later on in history you'll find that the Assyrians came in and routed out all the people, scattered them everywhere. And then you hear the 10 lost tribes of Israel. That's where it came from. But that's kind of a little bit ahead of that part. But so we're looking down at the bottom down there. Isaiah was living in Judah, the southern kingdom. And it makes a difference to know where he was and what's going on. We'll get on that. During the time of Isaiah, the northern kingdom was being threatened by the Assyrians because they stopped sending tax money. At one point, they owned them just like the Romans for so many years owned all of Israel. So somehow they got in good cahoots, if that's a good word, with Egypt. And they said, Egypt, we're not sending you any taxes anymore. Wrong, bad move. The Assyrians then, they came in and captured all of it. Isaiah was writing what he saw as coming in the future, which would be the Messiah. He wrote these words to encourage the people and give them hope for what is to come. If you're down in the southern kingdom and you just see the northern kingdom, 10 tribes get wiped out, you need some encouragement. Are we next? what's going to happen? We're only 2 tribes. Notice that Isaiah is not looking forward to a Messiah that would come to earth and die. That's not what he's looking for. And then leave again only to wait for his future return. For Isaiah, the Messiah would only come once. There would be no need for the second coming. Okay, he's still back here. He hasn't seen what's up here. Even today, many Jews are still waiting and hoping for the coming of the Messiah to rule the earth and bring peace among all the nations. That's what they're waiting for. But those Jews that are over there today about ready to try to reconstruct the temple and do all these things, they're still looking for the Messiah to come. Jesus wasn't it. They're still looking for him to come. Little do they know, it will be his second coming when he comes back. Okay, let's get a little picture. Isaiah prophesied for 54 years. 740 BC, 686 BC. That doesn't mean much until you look what happens. 722 BC, the Assyrians invaded Israel. Isaiah is a prophet during this time. And remember now, the southern kingdom seeing what's going on in the northern kingdom, and they're getting nervous. So Isaiah is trying to give them hope, and God's trying to give him the message to preach to the people. The people in Judah saw what happened to the northern kingdom. They needed encouragement and hope. Now, just to show you, if you go past, and it's funny, it's exactly 100 years later, the Babylonians invaded Judah, captured the southern kingdom, and hauled them back off. But they only took the ones that were rich. They took the ones that had skilled labor, and all the poor and the uneducated were left there. But all the rest were taken back to Babylon. And that was King Nebuchadnezzar, and he gave them a place to live. It says, okay, but I'm still your king. But I actually treated him not too bad when he was over there. So Isaiah is falling, you can see where he falls in that time period that, yeah, we've lost the northern kingdom up there. You know, they don't take it in one day, I guess you know. They don't even take it in 1 year, especially way back then. Of course, today, Israel proved to them that they could do it in 6 days. But back then, they would go in. So in the northern kingdom, the Assyrians, who they stopped paying taxes to, they came over. They went straight to Samaria. Samaria was the capital of Israel, the northern kingdom. They went to that capital, and they took all these people out, and they hauled them, most of them, back to Babylon, Assyria. So what they do then, they got people that are Gentiles from other nations, and they brought them in, and they put them in that city. You see something happening here? And most of the others, they were trying to scatter before they got captured. So that's where they got scattered. By going into Samaria, taking out the wealthy, taking out the skilled laborers, taking out the educated, leaving what's left, bringing in some Gentiles, putting them in there. And so you know where that leads up to later in the New Testament is Jews from Galilee would go all the way around and not walk through Samaria because they were half-breeds. They didn't like them. Nobody liked the Samaritans, or at least none of the Jews did. You've heard that before? Well, that's where it came from. Once he takes hold of the capital city, it wasn't hard to do all the rest. And so many of them scattered on their own, and some, they believed that the Assyrians captured them and they dropped them off in other countries. The 10 lost tribes of Israel, when you hear that term, you now know how they got scattered. Because it says in the future, when they all come back together, and many Jews, it'd be time for the Messiah, for them, the first coming. So you can get a picture of what it was. Isaiah saying, okay, this happened to the Assyrians. Then the Babylonians are down, come in and invaded Judah. Anybody know why they invaded Judah? It's a really interesting story. One of the high-ups in Babylon came down to visit in Jerusalem. And that dumb king took them and showed them the treasures in the temple, the treasures that they put over here, and they bragged about all this stuff. He goes back to Babylon and says, he reports that, here they come. Bad move, bad move. And they come in and they tore down the temple. They hauled off, again, kind of like the Assyrians, mostly just took the well-educated, the skilled workers, and the ones that were wealthy, and they took them back to Babylon. So that happened exactly in the answer. So, but it takes more than 1 year, so we don't know who in history picked out this time frame that the Babylonians did that and put one number, whether it was in the middle or is it at the front or is it at the left. Same thing within 722 BC when the Assyrians come. They give it a number. Well, it probably took place in approximately 20 years, banned and all this. And so now we know what Isaiah's writing about. He's trying to give hope to these two tribes that are left down in Judah, because they're still intact at this point. That kind of makes sense. It puts you what he's seen happen, who he's trying to encourage, and then he's talking about the coming of the Messiah. If you're reading on the internet something about something you don't know if it's written by a Jew or a Gentile, the Jews never put the word T-H-E in front of Messiah. Do you know that? I find that real interesting. I'm reading on, it's got to be written by a Jew. They call, you just use the word Messiah. Hope for the Messiah to come. They never said the hope Messiah to come. Look at it sometime, you'll see that. Most Christians are waiting and hoping for the rapture to come. Okay, so the Jews are waiting and hoping for the Messiah to come the first time. Most Christians today are waiting and hoping for the rapture to come. Yet some are waiting for the second coming of Jesus, not understanding the rapture. There's a lot of Christians in today's world that they have different views about the rapture, but Paul made it so clear, so clear. Do you remember when Paul was blinded on the way to Damascus? And then he went into the town of Damascus and he was blind for 3 days. And then after 3 days, God spoke to Ananias, who was a prophet who happened to be in Damascus. And he said, go over there, and they call it Straight Street. And that street is still there today. Straight Street, and there's a man named Saul of Tarsus. I hadn't changed his name yet, Saul of Tarsus. He said, go to him and give him this message I'm going to give you. And if you remember in the scriptures, Ananias said, whoa, wait a minute. That's the guy that's going and capturing all the peoples that are trying to follow Jesus. He said, He said, do it anyway. He did. He put his hands on him. And in that time, he told him, he says, God said, you will suffer for me. Paul was told before he even started, you are going to suffer for me. Today, Christians have a little bit of suffering. Why me, Lord? Interesting now. Let's get out of the Bible and let's go to the history books. Something that's not really in there. Paul was missing for the next 2 years. Nobody knows. Not the Bible doesn't mention it. We don't find it in history books. But they feel like in some of the history books, they think that God took him and he started teaching him all the things so he could come back. Because nobody knew about the rapture. Nobody, until Paul explained it to people. So Paul had some one-on-one education, if you will, on this. So he was prepared, but that's why Paul suffered so much. Yeah, we kind of gripe about little sufferings, but nothing like Paul. Okay, now let me share you something I find really interesting here. What Isaiah said in the passage that we just read, it will be fulfilled in the second coming of Jesus. Not the first coming, doesn't fit. At the beginning of 1,000-year reign. Isaiah wanted to give hope to the people for the future to come, and he wrote those. But as Josh would say, watch this. Watch. Watch. Isaiah said, in the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as the highest of the mountains, and it will be exalted above the hills, and all nations will stream through it. Did Jesus do that? No. That's how they missed the coming of the Messiah, falling back on the scriptures like this. I like what Paul said, though. He said, let no one in any way deceive you. That's a good message for today as well. For it will not come unless the apostasy comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as God. Paul's saying before that's going to happen that you're talking about, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. What do you think he's describing? Paul's describing in 2 Thessalonians here. That's a description of what? The Antichrist to come. Okay, let's break it down a little bit. First, it will not come unless the apostasy comes first. Well, what is the word it? It will not come. What won't come? It's just as we read about in the verses Messiah. Paul says what he said in Isaiah is not going to come unless the apostasy comes first. So now let's look at the word apostasy. What is it? Apostasy means an abandonment of one's faith or religious convictions. So Paul's saying the Messiah will not come back until you see all this other happening, everybody falling away. Actually, today could be part of that day. Everybody's falling away. Yeah. And it's not a nice world today, is it? Really not. But this classroom is very comforting. All of us. Paul's saying that yes, there is hope for the return of Jesus, but these evil things we talked about, done by the Antichrist, who is led by Satan. The Antichrist is a man. He can only do what Satan gives him power to do. He must take place first before the second coming of Jesus. John said it this way. He said, children, it is the last hour. And just as you heard that the Antichrist is coming, even now, many Antichrists have appeared. From this, we know that is in the last hour. So John was thinking, hey, it's in position, it could happen then. That's way back there. We're in position even closer. We say, no, it could happen anytime. John said that many Antichrists will come and they are here now, misleading people. Let's talk about that. He also said, who is the liar but the one who denies that Jesus is the Christ? This is the Antichrist, the one who denies the Father and the Son. False teachers and preachers are here today. They're here. There's lots of them. Now, some are teaching and preaching a false doctrine. When one of those says that God wants you to give half of what you earn, that's a false doctrine, okay? And some are preaching false doctrines. They don't preach once saved, always saved. But then there's others out there, they're only in for it for the money for themselves. So they'll tell you what they think you want to hear. The Bible calls that tickling ears. And they want to hear good things. So some of these so-called preachers today, they don't care about the gospel. What they're doing is they're just trying to get more to come and get more money to come in. And that's so the things that were said back then, Jesus could come, the rapture could come any day. It could have way back there. It could today. There's nothing to take place that hasn't already taken place for the rapture. We'll talk about that a little bit. Isaiah did what prophets were supposed to do. Tell the people what God told them and what God showed them. My opinion. I believe that many times these prophets do not fully understand what God spoke or showed them. Bill, you agree with that? Because we talked before class. I didn't know you agreed with that. Yeah. Do you think John, when he wrote the book of Revelation, understood all these things, and out of the sea came a beast, and he had 7 horns, and he had all that stuff. Do you think John understood all of it? Now, it's opinion, but I think not. But God said, write this in a book. And God said, woe to the man who takes away or adds to this book of Revelation. Whoa. So he gave away. John was taken up in a vision, and he got to see things. Paul also was taken up. When Paul talks about it, he doesn't want to brag about himself. He says, I know a man, he's talking about himself, that went to the 3rd heaven. We've talked about the 3 heavens. That's the heaven where Jesus would be. I know a man who went to the 3rd heaven and was shown many things. Some not allowed to be told. But that's where you learn in that 3rd heaven. That's where we think he was those 2 years right after he got his eyesight back. And God showed him many things. Nowhere else does anybody talk about the rapture that's going to take place but Paul, because he was shown these things. What we just read in Isaiah chapter 2 will definitely be fulfilled by Jesus the Messiah at the second coming. All of those things that he said, he's thinking is the only coming, the first. We're on the other side, and we've already seen what has happened. Now, Isaiah's not seen that yet. He's still in the Old Testament. He didn't know about Jesus come. But when the Antichrist comes, he will also fill what Isaiah wrote in chapter 2, misleading many in the world. Get him, Nick. So when he's writing, Isaiah's writing those 4 verses in chapter 2, and this all the things that the Messiah will do, the Antichrist will do every one of those also when he comes, the Antichrist. And it's going to win many people over. The Jews believe what Isaiah wrote in chapter 2. But let me share with you another chapter that Isaiah wrote, and the Jews don't want to talk about it. Skip way over to Isaiah chapter 53. Isaiah is writing this, and I don't feel that he knows what it is, but his job was to deliver the message. Who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of a dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain, like one from whom people hide their faces. He was despised, and we held him in low esteem. Who's he writing about? Jesus. But he didn't know that. He's writing this. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. Yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us to peace was on him. And by his wounds we are healed. That's Jesus. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each one of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shears is silent, so he did not open his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away, yet who of his generation protested? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgressions of my people he was punished. He was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, though he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth. What is chapter 53 talking about? Doesn't that describe Jesus? Now the Jews want to go back and look at Isaiah chapter 2 and say, oh yeah, there's hope when he comes. Jews even today. You talk to them about chapter 53, they don't want to talk about that. Why? Because that's not what they're looking for. They're looking for a Messiah that comes with a harsh, wielding a sword, and armies, and that's what they're looking for. So when Jesus came, he did not fit the mold. Some Jews were converted later after Paul started his ministry. But there's more in chapter 53 than that. But you can get the picture of what it is that the Jews say, no, he hadn't come yet. Well, what about chapter 53? Well, we don't know. We don't talk about that. It was Jesus. How can the Jews not see who Isaiah was writing about? How could they miss that? At least the Jews that witnessed it. Now, there's still more to read chapter 53. So, okay, the Jews liked a Messiah that was described in chapter 2. They like that one. They don't like the one that's in chapter 53.